gone live and people have started coming in. So whenever you want to come live with this, we get this done. So there are 20 people now.
Okay.
So welcome all. I'm just waiting for a couple of minutes for more people to join. So for people who are already watching this, if you have any questions, please start posting it as a comment, and we'll take it as we move in the conversation forward. So that's how it works. So people are joining in.
Yeah.
And, let's see. Yeah. So can whoever is watching it, can you also tell me about the voice? I think when Professor Ahuja joins, we'll do a testing with him also. But yeah. So for people who are watching, can you just tell me you're able to hear me properly? The voice is audible. Okay, good. So given that about 35 people are already there, we will get started as in the session. So this is Professor Narendra Ahuja. Thank you for joining. But I think I'll give you some background, and I'll let some background for people who have joined also. I think as I posted in the flyer, Professor Narendra Ahuja has a prolific research background. The question that we are going to be focusing today is to try and understand how great research, interesting problems, impactful research can be done. So the mode that we'll follow is we'll let Professor Ahuja speak for about 5, 10, 15 minutes of his opinion about what all could be done, what are his thoughts on doing interesting research, his experiences. And I've collated some questions over a period of time after I posted that the session is going to be there from people who can join. I will take up those questions. Of course, people who are already watching, please feel free to ask questions in the comments. We will take it as we move forward in the session. Thanks, Professor Ahuja, again. I will leave it to you for talking about for 5, 10 minutes. Specific is about talk about research. What is your impression about what students in India can do? Given that this is very focused on students from India, so if you can keep your understanding and your suggestions for students in India, given that you've seen students in India and you're currently also seeing students in India. And then we'll take up questions. I've also talked to you about earlier about some of these specific questions. We'll take that as we go. But now you can keep it as broad as you want.
Okay. All right. Research in India. I'm not sure if you could ask for more. So research is what is research? the objective is to discover, and there are at least two ways to do that. One is to climb the mountain because it exists, and the other is that you have something to bring home, and it's on the mountain, and therefore you have to climb it to bring it. You're not doing it because it's fun to climb, but it's because it's fun to have something that is on the mountain, and you need to do that. So one is very application motivated, and the other is curiosity motivated, pure curiosity motivated. Now, there are both kinds of people in the research world. You will see people who create problems, solve them, and then long after they have solved them, people discover that that problem is actually real, that whatever they did does eventually indeed have a solution, has a use, when the use wasn't clear when the solution was discovered, or the research was done. On the other hand, there are people who don't worry about why the world is the way it is, why it works, how it works the way it does, but they have a problem at hand, and they want to solve that problem. Now, the problem might be simple, in which case they will come up with a solution and get their job done, and then they're happy. Or the solution is not obvious, and they dig into it. Why is it, how to do this, how to do that? They break their head. Finally, they might end up somewhere. But the more challenging it is, the more likely there is depth to it, and therefore they will have to dig deeper, they will have to think more, they will have to learn more from different sources, maybe learn from nature, learn from traditions, learn from this, learn from that, and mix things up, and hypothesize solutions, test them if they work, and in this cycle eventually they'll find a solution. And that very likely would have a lot of innovation in it, because all that thinking that went into it was for a reason. So the solution that they come up with to their problem is now, they have a solution at least, and it involved research. But their satisfaction is coming from having solved their problem. And in the process, maybe they also enjoyed the thrill that comes with seeing things differently and seeing new things, etc. So now, coming back to India, as I was saying, both kinds of people are there. Wherever you go, you will find both these types, the pure curiosity types and the pure engineer types. And there is room for both. Now, if you are the latter kind, where you are looking for problems to solve, then being in India is a boon, because there is no dearth of them. If you don't have your own, ask your neighbor. They will just go on and on and on. There will be no end to the list of problems. So that is not something you're going to be short of. And if we are short of them, that's also good news. We don't have problems to solve, mundane problems, then maybe we can go to supra-mundane problems. Think about why black holes are there, etc. But until then, we have employment. So now, if you go out and step on the road, immediately you see traffic problems. It's not that when you're crossing the road, just first look to the right and then look to the left. That formula will kill you, because as you look to the right, there is a guy coming on the wrong side and will hit you. So the way you save yourself on the road is not by following the same rules as you might follow somewhere else. So transportation is a problem. When you go jogging or when you're just walking, you may not be assured of getting good air to breathe. So there is that problem. There is the problem of food you're eating is full of whatever, pesticides on it, over fertilized, etc. So there is no end to problems, and the problems are there not because they have to be there. There is a number of sources. It could be.
I think a couple of minutes for all of them to join back.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, because they must have
Yes.
gotten disconnected, so they'll all come back. I think turnaround is pretty good. Yeah, yeah. We'll give I think we got disconnected. I'll just give a second for people to join back, and then please start.
Okay.
Actually, you can start. About 30 people are there.
Yes. So, so the summary is that we have enough problems, and now let me say where AI comes in. And I really don't have to say much. It's obvious how, in fact, there are already ways in which AI is being used to help with traffic regulation, control. For example, catching violations. There are devices already that will tell you if a food item is same as it claims to be, or there are it's adulterated, for example. There is a there is, of course, many other examples, even working in India for a long time, such as, for example, the trivial example of train ticketing, and today, of course, face recognition, gait recognition, etc. So the problem is the problems are there. The AI's role is there, and therefore the combination is there, and not all solutions are obvious. Not all solutions are trivial. They are not the kind where you just look at the problem and these. John, I'll call you back. So the solution is not obvious. There is research needed, and research may be at the bachelor's project level, master's project level, or it's a PhD thesis level. So the summary is that in India, no matter how many PhD theses you want to write, there is enough fuel for it.
I think that's kind of. So let's take some questions, Professor Ahuja. I think 2-3 questions were asked. Let's take them. So I think Manshul Belani asked, if you have a research problem in mind, how do you validate if the problem statement is worth doing research? I mean, you talked about traffic. Yeah, there is a problem to identify whether somebody is violating. So that's another question that I had, which is also the question about difference between engineering and research, right? So PhD students generally have this question of, I'm just building things, where is research here? But let's take Manshul's question first. How do you validate that the problem statement is worth doing a research?
Well, if you think that the problem is there, which of course is there because that's why you are looking into it, and the solution is not there, which also is true because otherwise you would not worry about this. The question then is, why is it not there? Is it because people have not thought about it, which is also possible, which happens a lot? Or is it that people have tried and haven't hit upon a solution? If that's the case, why is it that people have not been able to do it? Is it because it seems like the problem is difficult? What is it that makes the problem difficult? There must be something. Now, if you start looking into it and you don't get the answer, and you don't get the answer, and you don't get the answer still, there is some depth to it. You may give up, or you may realize that yes, there are these basic questions that need to be answered for you to come up with a solution. Now, those questions themselves may lead to other questions, and soon you will know that this is not your trivial type of activity. And again, this is your question is being, I'm replacing it with qualitative answer, but the amount of effort it takes for you to do it, and then someone else also tells you, your advisor tells you, your colleagues, your senior colleagues tell you that, boy, this is really neat, this is cool what you're doing. And then you realize that some of the questions are half answered by some papers, which are called research papers, or so and so says it's a research topic. It's not clear to me that there is a definitive quantitative answer to this. But if you feel it is deep because it's taking you a lot of question is leading to many other questions, some of those questions are at least partly categorized as research done someday or still open research problems. And your respected colleagues, seniors tell you that this is worth a PhD or a master's. That's a validation of the undertaking.
So let's take another.
So
yeah, people are still coming. Yeah, when they join, we will start seeing the names here. Anyway, this video is kept. I will leave the video on the Facebook itself. People can go back and look at it also. I have a pointer which can actually point to these videos, and I will also download this video and put it on YouTube. So therefore, the multiple places that people can actually get access to this video later. But the live session is interesting because of these questions. Always people are interested in speaking to people like you live, right? I think Manshul asked the question, so and there are 2 more questions that we take. Yeah, given that there are about 25 people again, let's start. So Manshul, I hope one, you were able, you are again, yeah, I see you here. So Manshul, I hope you got some idea about Professor Ahuja's answer. If not, continue asking some questions, we'll take it again. But there was another question which said, how do you survey for doing research? Meaning, basically, I think the question is, what would be your strategy or suggestions to students on doing literature review?
So first thing is exactly the problem you have encountered. You state it in some way, obviously, and then see if some of the obvious ways of phrasing the problem, the words, technical terms, English words, if you just search for them, that's obviously the first thing to do. But then chances are you will get that very quickly. Now the real survey comes when you want to know whether somebody has solved it. The statement of problem, or how many different ways there are that people have solved it. Where is the information? So you trace people's activities, work, by these various words that lead you to that activity, that research. The more greater challenge comes when you are looking for the equivalent of synonyms. So in other words, if you have some sub-concepts in that formulation of the statement of the problem or formulation of the problem, and you want to know whether some other people have done some work on those concepts or sub-concepts, even if they have not worked on the problem itself. But since your solution is going to be made up of pieces, and if those pieces have been worked upon, then you want to know that also, so that you can construct your solution from the solutions to the pieces of the problem. Remember that your solution to the problem doesn't have to be entirely new. You can have a formulation for it, and then that is sort of set of sub-problems. And if you get solutions to the sub-problems, you can assemble then a solution from the sub-solutions. So now you are looking at various sub-problems. whether they have been worked upon. And this is recursive now. Just as you look for the problem, now you look for the sub-problems. And that again can be pure straightforward based on keywords or some concept that you think will be encountered as you look for the as you look at the sub-problem. So the survey, to summarize, is the way you do survey is that you look at straightforward definition and then elaborate versions of it, both in terms of technical terms as well as derivatives of it, where you have implications of those problems to sub-problems, and then you search for sub-problems.
So now let's take some. I hope the person who asked the question got the answer for how to do survey and doing research. So I'm requesting everybody who's looking at watching this live session, if you have questions, post those comments. But I'm going to take some direct questions with Professor Ahuja. So now the question is, given that you are also looking at ITRA here and the organization for funding research and all that. So what kind of research do you think are, so to say, top 3 problems that if students have to explore on, what kind of interesting problems? And let's keep the AI discussion slightly after this, because I think many students would be interested in knowing from you where AI can be applied and all of that. But let's do for first some kind of broad level, most exciting problems according to you.
The most exciting problems, I think, are the most serious problems that we are facing today. Because if you come up with a solution for any one of these problems, the excitement that will be generated by having solved it, the excitement can be in terms of being recognized for it. It could be in terms of making money from it. It could be in terms of pure simple satisfaction.
You're the only ones accessing the Wi-Fi now. It's great. We had very good audience actually. I really like the number of people who are joined. So this shows the number of people currently viewing, and then when I show you a video, I'll show you how it will show us the total number of views the video has had. See this part already close to 100 people have seen it. So that's the measure for how many people are getting. This will keep continuing as we, not just now. At any time, people can come back to this video.
Nice.
This is showing you currently how many people are. Okay, so now that 20 people are there, we'll go back to the most interesting problem you mentioned about. You started saying about the most interesting problems are the most serious ones. I'll continue.
Yeah. So to be specific, let's ask the questions. Let's ask the question about the seriousness of the problem. So look at the problem of water, problem of agriculture, problems in agriculture. So, for example, the farmer doesn't know what to sow. Why? Because the farmer doesn't know what the weather is going to be like at the time of seed germination. Let's say that the farmer sows a seed today, and the forecast is going to be, and the forecast, of course, says that it is going to be dry or wet. And if it doesn't turn out to be the case, then the decision that was made at the time of sowing may turn out to be wrong. So, similarly, suppose that there is a forecast which says that that in 3 weeks the humidity and the moisture levels will be such, then the farmer will prepare to buy seeds of the right kind, rice or bajra. And if the forecast is wrong, then he bought the wrong seed. The farmer may not know anything about the pest that is about to arrive, and as a result is not ready to face the attack, because if the pest is not checked in a given amount of time, then it will destroy the crop. So here are some examples of forecasts. Similarly, uh, there are weeds that are to be taken out. There is soil mapping to be done. A soil has its own makeup, and for a given plant, type of plant, you need certain mix of minerals in the soil, certain amount of moisture in the soil. Now, fertilizers simply compensate for what is missing by adding it externally. Now, if you don't know what is missing, you will just throw the fertilizer on the field. It will include things that the soil needs, and it will include things that the soil doesn't need. What it doesn't need is poison. It's just there. Now, that's one dimension. But then again,
one of the research problems is to make sure that the internet doesn't break.
yes. Maybe that's it.
So I think that's probably the first thing they should do, the bandwidth issues.
So,
but the same people are joining, which is also nice. People are asking wrong questions. So for people who are joining, sorry, I think one of the things that we should take up is definitely doing research on getting better internet bandwidth and things like that. We are the only ones using actually this network right now, and still it is breaking. So I think we need some kind of research to be done to figure out that, I'm doing Facebook Live, so make sure that entire bandwidth that is there for this floor or this router is just given to me.
Yeah. And it's a building for telecommunication.
It's a building for it's a building for telecommunication. Also, we're sitting in a building, so I think that's an irony, I guess. Okay, please continue.
All right, okay.
I did. This is breaking very frequently, and it's disturbing the flow. Yes, I think I'll let you do. This is another longer question. 2 questions are here, so I'll make it bigger just in case people start coming in. So this question is how to tackle a situation where the potential solution to a problem breaks down midway. This is probably more. So for early career researchers, would you recommend incremental work or do low-hanging fruit that can be comparatively easily translated in publications and career progression, as opposed to potentially higher impact research that could have more challenges and run the risk of hitting a wall? Also, I think this question as an advisor, how do you balance the need to publish for your students with the need to having high impact? Yeah, so yeah, you can, with the serious problems, if there's anything more to do, otherwise we can take up these questions.
Right. That's a great question.
Okay, so let's repeat the question. So you're going to take this question. Yeah. Okay, so for the benefit of everybody, we were just going through the questions that people had asked. So we're taking this question by Abhinav Shukla. Abhinav, I think it's a very interesting question. Let's take the question. I'll read out the question for benefit of others. For early career researchers, would you recommend incremental work or low-hanging fruit that can be comparatively easily translated into publications for career progression, as opposed to potentially higher impact research that could have more challenges and run the risk of hitting a wall? That's the first question, and the other question you take it as an advisor. Yeah. So it's basically an advice to the young faculty.
This is an extremely good question, and really I congratulate you for asking this. It's a problem that all of us face. But let me tell you one thing. If you have a solution that is coming to your mind, which is out of the box, which is on the one hand extremely inviting, and you get that feeling of thrill. Oh, what about this approach? And it gives you goosebumps. You shouldn't be looking back. You shouldn't be looking back at all. what is likely to happen is the following. Suppose that you take this completely out of the box approach. The reason it is out of the box is because it is very different from anything that you have seen. Anything you have seen in the approaches that you have encountered to this problem. It's very different. Now, if you have studied other approaches to the problem, but you have this out of the way, somewhat crazy thought in mind, this is how you can approach. Chances are that even if you make small progress, you don't solve the entire problem, but you solve part of the problem using this completely new approach, it is probably going to be more valuable than having solved the problem incrementally, just giving a twist to something that already exists. Because 1,000 other people could have done this. But since you have taken this new approach and solved the problem partly, there may be other people who will be thinking slightly differently from you and might extend your solution further. So in that sense, what you did, even though partial, was much more impactful than having done a small increment. Now, second, if you take it all the way or most of the way, it's certainly great because it will be generating so much more activity than if you do it otherwise. So, on the other hand, you don't come up with out-of-the-box approaches because you say, okay, on Fridays, I will come up with out-of-the-box approaches, and rest of the week, I'll do incremental work. It doesn't happen that way. Out-of-the-box things are like precedents of breakthroughs, and you don't plan breakthroughs. They just happen. And there are many examples of this. You're doing something completely different, and somehow you get drawn in some ways that we don't understand in a different direction, and it looks very exciting. So if you are struck with this crazy out-of-the-box idea, if I were you, I would never think to not pursue it in favor of pursuing something that's more likely to give you something back. And the fear of, as you call it, hitting the wall, it should not stop you from pursuing exciting new directions.
So he has a follow-up question. Abhinav, I assume you got some kind of an answer for that. Your second part of the question is also interesting, which is that also as an advisor, how do you balance the need to publish for your students with need to have an high impact? So this is for a faculty, but how do you, as an advisor, you've advised more than 50 PhD students. How do you manage that? Or what suggestions would you have?
So we have encountered this many times, not once or twice or thrice, but several times, number of times. What happens is that even if you encounter your approach to be not as promising as it looked the first time, it would still solve it will still provide some solutions to some sub-problems that would be different. So the incremental value would still be obtained. It has not happened to us when no incremental value was obtained, even if it did not prove to be as earth-shakingly novel as we thought. So I don't think that the ceiling is high, but the floor is not that bad also in this case. So I would say when I see a student doing this, I say all the power to you, spend more time. And as you grope for this, some ideas in this new direction, there is every chance that some of those ideas, even if they did not deliver what you wanted them to deliver, they would deliver something that was at least as meaningful as the classical incremental one.
So let's take this question. This is probably shorter. Pranav Goel has a question about how much is a PhD important if one wants to ultimately join the R&D arm of an organization. So this question of BTech and MTech, and particularly in computer science, there are lots of people who do undergraduate, masters, but trying to get into research labs. Is PhD necessary, and why?
So PhD becomes possibly very useful if you are facing problems that require some theoretical tools and underpinnings. Because what happens is when you do PhD, uh, in the American system at least, and now of course all over the world. Earlier in some of the systems, it wasn't as critical to take a lot of courses, read a lot of books by requirement, not by choice. So by choice, of course, people always did, but it's now almost universally mandatory for you to take courses.
Absolutely.
Which means that whether you like it or not, you are pumping a lot of information into your brain and keeping it there. So that knowledge. Now, what happens is when you have all these things sitting in your head, the combinatorics comes into play. You can combine idea 1 with idea 2 with idea 3, idea 4. So there are more combinations. If you have only 2 ideas, there are very few combinations. If you have 200 ideas, pieces of knowledge, there are more mixtures. So you can do more mix and match and therefore come up with newer combinations. So the question again?
So this was about the advisor.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was the question from Pranav Goel. Necessary for PhD
Yes,
for
yes,
a
true.
organization.
Yeah. So now suppose that you are encountering not incremental problem, because suppose that you are a BTech and you're not even a BTech, let's say you're a high school person and you join a factory. There is no doubt in my mind, and of course we all have seen it, that as this person grows in the organization, he will and she will make solid contributions. The tool will be changed this way, tomorrow it will be changed that way, tomorrow it will be changed that way, based upon the feedback from the users or the researcher himself. And there will be incremental changes. But to replace the bird with the airplane will not happen without basic insights, fundamental insights that yes, flying doesn't mean this, flying means.
So to say, alert notification types. Saying,
Also, it's like you have something to say each time.
yeah. So essentially, you'll get something like this on the phone, essentially, some notification types, and these are the people who are live now. So it's just available to you. So we'll take. Yeah, I think we definitely need to do I think one of the research problems we should give to students is Wi-Fi. But I think there are students now, so let's start again. Which is we were talking about the question on necessity for PhD, but I think your statement of replacing bird with a plane is an excellent one, right? Because it gives you the what is that the PhD can bring. But let's take the next question. Alok Debnath has this question: what is the process of making a research idea into a research problem? How do a student decide what problems are worth pursuing? I think some kind of method that you would suggest, or your PhD students, or how do I decide this is what? Because as you said earlier in literature review, I could go read about, I could do this iteratively, I could end up having 10 problems in front of me. Which one do I choose? If there is any methods to choose.
Mm-hmm. So there are two, as we started out saying, that your research can be motivated by a real problem, in which case there is not that much to worry about, because you want to solve the problem, and whatever it takes, you will do. The problem that you're referring to arises when you're doing problem for the sake of problem, because you want to get a PhD, and that's why you're doing research. So now you have to somehow satisfy the requirements to get the PhD. And that's okay too, because you want to build your abstraction skills, your analytic skills, analysis skills, etc. Now there, very common practice that I've seen is that you go to a problem, you go to a paper, and you ask this question to yourself: how do I minimally tweak this thing so I can cross the border of threshold of being acceptable as a different thing? This is a very common viewpoint. What is the minimal I can do to this problem so that it looks different enough and acceptable for a PhD? That's not the way to do quality work. That is not the way to do something that you'll be proud of in the long run. The question, that same thing you could do when you read the papers, you extract it and ask yourself, what is it doing? I forget about whether the value is 0.71 or 0.72, or whether this threshold is that, or how many variables are here, etc. You ask the question, what is the fundamental issue that is being addressed by this approach? Once you do that, you ask yourself, if I were faced with the same problem, just like this person was, what would I do? Now, this is above the level of all the details. You remove this experiment section, for example. What was the problem?
Because last time I did only through my phone. Because phone, you need the phone, you can use, so this is both of us are sitting together, whereas if I were to do this when you are in the US, I can't use my machine. It is only available on iPhone apps. So for that, I used actually my 4G and it worked perfectly fine. Yeah. So the question was, how does the student decide on what problems are worth pursuing?
Yeah. So essentially, like I was saying, if you're searching for a solution to a problem, it's okay because you keep searching until you have the solution. But if you are coming from the end where you have looked at some papers and you want to if you want to make some changes to it because somebody has taken an approach to it and you want to make a difference, you want to take a different approach, then the general rule to maximize the impact and the quality and therefore acceptability of what you do is to keep abstracting the paper out, leaving the details behind, and coming up to some level where you say these are the 3 or 4 or 5 main parts of this problem, or convert it into a block diagram. Now look at the block diagram and you ask yourself, would you solve the same problem this way? Would you draw the same block diagram to solve that problem? Or it doesn't have to be block diagram, it could be some other abstraction. And if you can think of ways of doing it differently, well motivated, of course. Why is it that you want to do it differently? Then, if you start coming down and convert that into a real solution, you will have a different detailed solution and a different paper, which would be not incrementally different at the low level, but significantly different because you went all the way and looked at your own, looked at the problem in your own way. You came up with your own block diagram, your own abstraction, and now you have simply detailed it more.
Okay, good. So that was the question on what problems to pursue. So here was the other question Udit Pant asked earlier. This is, I think it looks like the mid-PhD thesis crisis, but the question is how to tackle situations where potential solution to a problem breaks down midway. Meaning I'm trying something as you suggested. I do the literature review, I find out that these are 4 problems. I somehow figure out this is my interest, I start, but after a year it looks like there's no way to go forward. Meaning, as you also said earlier, which is my peers, my advisor, my other students say that it's not going anywhere. What do I do?
Well, I mean, those of you who have done search algorithms, what is typically search? You try something, you search here, right? You search there, you search there, you search there. Blind alley. You go one step back and try an alternative that you stacked up. Now, if you finish these, you go one level back, you look at the stack there until you find a path that takes you to the goal. That's the usual search paradigm. So, and to say that no, you won't have a tree and you won't have a set of stacks that you have left behind, that's very unlikely because it's you never go to the goal directly. Yeah, there are always alternatives in the search. If you did not have alternatives, then you are gifted because you know exactly what the solution is, and you are heading there straight. In which case, you will also see that it's a blind alley, so you won't go there. So I think the despondency is the worst thing that can happen. You say, okay, this doesn't work in this direction. Why did I do this? I did it because I wanted this thing. But then you have intermediate stage from which you are trying to extend. You just go back and search for other solutions. If it doesn't work, go back one step.
So I think that's, I think that's a brilliant answer in terms of abstraction of the search tree. But one of the suggestions that we've been also looking at or talking to students is to actually maintain some level of journal or some level of diary of problems, right? The stacking, meaning unless you have, you spent a year reading papers, coming up with ideas, but at the end of the day, your paper is only 10 pages that you're producing. But you've got to keep some way, document the problems that you're thinking through, the ideas that you have. I think that's such an important thing. That's when you can go back on the tree. Otherwise, the tree is gone.
Yeah.
So there's another question by Abhinav Dire. Apart from the benefits of getting ideas from courses, why should a student and MS graduate go for a PhD and pursue academic research as opposed to joining a company's research wing and pursuing research side? These days, we see places like Google Brain doing impactful research, which university research groups have conveniently been doing. I think the question is about master student doing research. Why should I pursue PhD?
Yes. So it's the.
I think the question is why should or shouldn't?
Yeah.
I think he's asking the both.
Right. So, you remember the breadth first search and depth first search. So in breadth first search, you try different things without having that much idea of which direction you'll find the goal in. In depth first, you make a commitment, even if it is to betray you later, but you make a commitment, then you dig this way. Masters, this method of not going for PhD and going deep is the depth first search. But if you want to get many different types of expertise and have it in your bag, so that tomorrow when you need this or that, you all know at least, you know them all in the sense that you know at least what is involved, where to look, what kinds of solutions this particular direction might deliver. So you might do nonlinear optimization, you might do linear optimization, you might do genetic algorithms, you might do random algorithms, where random search is involved. So all these different things, and you know roughly what is involved, what is good about it, what's bad about it. So if you have this thing, you will not probably do all of them if you are going deep into one direction. And therefore you will not probably know what you are missing when you are trying to look for a solution deep down here. So it's a diversified portfolio in finance. You put your eggs in different baskets.
Don't put them all in one basket and get into PhD. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I hope that gave you an answer of student of masters and PhD. It's basically master student getting a lot of ideas about different areas, PhD going in depth. But Pranav Goyal asked this question. It's a long one, but I think the question is, he's saying that the majority of the papers that are coming out now focus on pure deep learning, and his area is NLP. His question is, does any other research area have this similar kind of problems, which is that everybody is applying the similar kind of techniques? Somehow I feel these models, although being useful, will not be able to capture the intricacies of human language. I think he's from NLP, so I think the question is about these methods cannot, at least to some extent, capture what humans are thinking or writing. So is there any other areas and your reactions to it?
This is the Pranav Goel question.
Yeah, this is the Pranav Goel question.
Yes. So this is what you said is really a concern that many people have. When you do use things like deep learning, what it does is it really says, don't worry about the details. Here's, I'm a black box. You give me this, I'll give it to you as a result. You don't worry about the details. The question is, are you using what's inside the box as the focus of your activity, or you want to use it as a tool and you really have a bigger network, bigger edifice? This is just a small part of it. It's like there were times when people were discouraged from using calculators. Why? Because people said if you use calculators, your brain will go dead because you will not be exercising that aspect. However, if you do the calculations, if you get the answers to the calculations ready-made, it's conceivable. It's actually true that you do bigger things. You have larger formulations. These are just small parts of them. So the question is, it's not deep learning or calculators. It is, what is it that they are making easier? And if whatever they are making easier is your playground, then it's a bad thing, because you are replacing your whole thesis with a black box. Then it doesn't work. On the other hand, if you are thinking of a much larger problem and this calculation is taking 5 months for you, then you would rather have something that will get this problem out of the way and you come back to the real larger problem. So if you say that my NLP is a deep learning problem, then clearly all the intricacies of the language that you're referring to are buried into the box and you will never have access to them. And you will be out of it because this is what you wanted. The nuances of the language, which are now lost because they are part of the box. But if you can fragment the box into pieces, again, might be deep learning, such that your structure that you have is still retained and the parts are replaced by boxes which you couldn't care less about. If that's the case, then you can play with your ideas much more efficiently and quickly because you have taken away the labor of designing the branches and your area of interest is still captured in the structure that you have retained.
Yeah, that's, I think, amazing. I think that answer. So I think we have taken all the questions that were posted as comments. So if there are any questions, feel free to ask again in the comments. But let's take some broader level questions from Roja, which is AI, right? I think many students had sent questions earlier to me. What kind of things do you suggest students to explore, or first to gain skills? What kind of skills? And then what kind of problems can be solvable, or even made attempts to within the context of India using AI? AI, I think definition itself can be as broad as you think it's.
So two questions are, one is?
So one is how to gain skills of, let's take AI, if there is any specific one. Second is, how do you apply this AI skills? What kind of problems do you see? I think earlier you talked about food, traffic, all of this, meaning where all do you think AI is going to play?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure in IT area you're seeing many people are trying to solve these problems using AI.
Mm-hmm. So let me give you some examples of the kinds of problems that have been solved recently in this one initiative. Of course, I'm sure there are others, people doing elsewhere. So one of our teams has, and the presence of the degree to which AI is present varies across these problems that I'm going to. So,
Yeah, let's give some time.
There is that.
Yeah, but already I see a lot of people thanking me for the answer and everything. I'm just tracking the same thing here. So
they are, I guess, students enrolled in.
No, nothing. This is just my so to say Facebook network. And given that we are making public, I don't even know people joining. I don't need to know. These are all really the public people. It may be even I see some are faculty also. They're not just students. So the way it is working is I'm making it live. I have a network of people who are my friends in Facebook who get to see it when I do. But what happens is when they join and like, it goes to their friends also. So it's just suddenly it gets a larger set of nodes can watch it. And given that Facebook is making it so to say available like this on my homepage, like the stories, so it becomes more accessible to people. And I've seen Facebook doing recommendations also. They would recommend saying somebody in this location, they would say there's a video now going live. So suddenly somebody is getting to watch you now, even somebody sitting here. So they're doing. Yeah, this is fabulous. Meaning, I think so just the number of views, if you see, right, we are already having each of the parts. Unfortunately, if it was all together, we would know nicely how many people are generally watching it. But I think we have already had 200, 300 views of the video first one we started. Okay, so coming back to the question, given that some of you are here, the question that we were talking about was AI and its impact, and Professor Ahuja was talking about starting to talk about one specific project that he was going to explain.
So here is an example of a nice computational system that solves a real world problem. So we have a team led by IISc and has BITS Pilani Hyderabad and CDAC and Vadodara University, MS University Vadodara. And what they have done is they have taken the data that is gathered about rainfall when it occurs. They already know the topography they have collected, topography of the land, let's say given a city. They have the topographical data, they have the rain gauge data, they have the building information, where buildings are. They have drainage systems information. And then what they do is, as the rain starts to fall, they make predictions about at what rate will the water accumulate in which part of the city. So since they have the topography and the water flows downwards, so they can now predict at what rate will the water accumulate or how many feet per minute or per hour, so that they can make flood predictions. There is another project in which if you have, like I said earlier, if you have communication infrastructure coming apart because of, let's say, earthquake, these people have developed boxes which you can throw away, which you can scatter across the affected area, and then they will act like towers where people who are buried in the rubble, but their phones are still on in the golden hours, they can communicate not via the old towers which are destroyed, but by these boxes. And so it's very valuable because the people can tell you where they are, you can hear their moaning, etc. There is another project where internet has been set up among boats, fishermen's boats, away from the shore where there is no Airtel or any other service. They have devices on their boats which get connected, and then together they cluster and every now and then send information to the shore with a narrow beam. There's many others so the one I was telling you about was the setting up internet away from the shore. So now you can, the fishermen know when they're crossing international borders. The fishermen may also know what fish is selling in the market through the communication between shore and them. And their families know that they are still alive, even though they left 2 weeks ago. So there is very important societal need that is being served by this, and this is very creative work. It's not just picking up something that's in the market. Then there are projects like estimating where there is water, whether there is water underground, estimating which are the best places where you don't want to build so that aquifer is charged to the maximum degree, because wherever the aquifer is most accessible, you don't want to stop the water flow there. Estimating the quality of water, what's in it, carbon dioxide, arsenic, mercury, etc., whatever problems there might be in water, estimating those. If you have a network of water distribution, can you tell there is leakage somewhere? And more importantly, or not, I shouldn't say more importantly, alternatively, is there pilferage? That means it's a large leakage which could not be because of some cracks. So these are all problems that are very real. Transportation. So suppose you have these, all these violations that happen. 2 days ago, 3 days ago, there was a whole section on the TV where they talked about problems with traffic. So can we do something about this? Just imagine for a second, if your thesis made, let's just take one violation. Just take one violation. Forget about all the others. You just do one violation. Look at the impact on India. Not to mention all the Africa and all the rest of the Asia region. So, and of course, if you solve it, it won't be one problem because your algorithm will not be custom made for one violation. They could do much more. And so it's really very obvious how to do research, how to find thesis topics, especially if you are problems oriented. And the other nice thing is that once you pick problems, and if your interests lie in fundamental questions, abstractions, formulation, you will find a reason to go into your cubby hole and do some theoretical stuff because the problem motivated you. When you solve real problems, they are not verticals, they are horizontal. They have all kinds of challenges that are interrelated. It's up to you which ones you want to trace.
Yeah. So let's take, I think, given bandwidth issues and it's also getting late. So let's do some questions which was posed as a comment. So you can keep the answers short. How do you read papers efficiently and what are some good methods or practices? So Kishan Sairam, I think this is a question you're asking. I will recommend parts of the answer is actually in the earlier parts of the session now, where Prof. Ahuja was suggesting how to take up to literature review. I'll recommend you to go watch that, which is basically looking at papers, figuring out some kind of keywords and synonyms, and then doing this iterative thing in the paper with references and all that. So Kishan, I'll recommend that. But I think let's take up this Abhinav question, Professor Ahuja. I think we answered one part of his question. He's framing a question slightly differently, which is follow up on my question. If my question was more like research in a PhD versus research when working for a company, what are the pros and cons? So I think the question is about, I'm working for a company X and doing research versus I'm doing research for my PhD. You can keep it short.
Yeah. So in a company, chances are that you will be required to produce something, and for good reasons. They are not to be blamed for this. So if you're doing research on this product and you go 1 degree off, it's okay. You go 1.5 degrees off, it's okay. But if you go 60 degrees off, somebody will ask you, why do you think you'll come back to this? It'll take you into the wild. And they will, no, it's theoretically possible that you'll be back again, but the probability goes down. If you are doing the same thing in the university, they will not say, will you come back to this path? They'll say, is this interesting? Is this more interesting path? And if it is, don't worry about what you set out to do. Just take this. So in one case, you're following your heart. In the other case, you're following your orders.
There's a nice quote for this. I'll let you to go find it, Abhinav, about working for your own ideas and working for others' ideas. But Shikhar Jaiswal, Abhinav, I hope you got the answer. But Shikhar Jaiswal is asking this question, which is, what is a better strategy for an independent researcher who wishes to do foundational research, look for a better solution to an already well-documented problem, or exploring an entirely new application or domain? Shikhar, I don't know whether I understand what an independent researcher is, but I will let Professor Ahuja to take this, which is, what is the better strategy for an independent researcher who wishes to do foundational research, look for a better solution to an already well-documented problem, or exploring an entirely new application? Shikhar, I would also recommend you to go look at the earlier parts of the discussion where Professor Ahuja was broadly talking about looking for problems, where I think one of the questions was about Yes, we are live, but nobody is here. So if you see now, the earlier first videos that we started already has 140 views. So that's very nice in terms of number of people who have come to the session. For example, this one, 150 views already. So this is 200. 200 people have already seen this, the one that we started.
Something about the network.
That's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm excited about it, because I think my network is just pretty large, and particularly with the students who are interested in doing these different things, I definitely have a larger set of people who are connected to me. And of course, that's the reason why I'm also trying to explore this medium to get people like you, because the multiplicative factor is so big. Meaning, see, suddenly you have, I'll tell you whenever this, in the past I've done in 24 hours, if this was a one set video without any disconnects, one interactions like people like you, in less than 24 hours, it would hit 1,000 views. 1,000 people sitting and listening to your thoughts, I think it's phenomenal, right? And people whom we don't even know. It's not like IIIT Hyderabad students, IIIT Delhi students. We are forcing them to come into a room and ask them to listen to you. But this is like all people, 11 o'clock in the night, they're sitting and listening to you, which means they must be interested. They must be committed to whatever they're asking, right? So that's the reason why I am super excited. Yeah. So yeah, some people are here. So last question that we took was about from Shikhar, talking about independent researcher versus taking up the deeper problem versus incremental problem. Shikhar, I will recommend you to go look at earlier parts of the discussion that we've had. Now, for people who are still there, it's already 11 o'clock. I know it's pretty late. But if you still have any questions, please share in a minute or two, or in a minute, we'll take it up. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. And thanks to Professor Ahuja for his time. But one thing we just talked when we were offline was that we can try and do one thing. I can collate these questions that you guys have asked until now, create, so to say, a polished set of questions. I will have Professor Ahuja record the answers without these internet issues in his laptop or in my laptop, and I will publish the video if it's possible. Depending on all our time commitments, everything, we'll try and do this. And the other advantage this kind of platform provides also is this spreading of this. So somebody clicks, one of the person who's connected to my network is watching this video now. They do a share. So if you see, they do a share, it goes to their network. Suddenly the power of multiplication just comes into play. And I see some people are sharing it also. And they can come back to it. So it's going to be on my timeline. So that's my timeline. It's going to be on my timeline. So anybody can come to it at any point in time. So only that is broken into some 10 chunks, which I don't like. Meaning, because usually when you have a video of 1 hour, 1.5 hours, the penetration is also higher because people are continuously watching the same video instead of this 10 videos that they have to look at. And we also did not plan it in a way like when it breaks, we'll stop the question. If these chunks were only questions, then I think that's also better. But given the randomness in the internet, I think the chunking also did not happen properly. But I don't see any other questions. Okay, so there is, on a lighter note, do you think AI will take over the world? Pranav Goyal is asking. Okay, any good online resources for future researchers? I think that's more serious. Let's do. Any good online resources for future researchers? I mean, is there anything particular that comes to your mind when somebody asks you, oh, where do I go start for doing research?
Yeah, so I would strongly recommend that you create a balance between how people learning about how people thought about this subject before certain year and after certain year. Because what's happening is, like many other areas of investigation, AI and AI also has its waves. So there are societal, not societal, but sociological factors at work. So if you just concentrate in a narrow window, you will get exposed to the in depth, certain.
I think if you're available, I could just send the question.
Yeah, sure.
You get somebody here to sit with the laptop, record it, and ask them to give me the file. I'll upload it. I think that's much more simpler. Yeah. No, it's also about this about people like you coming or at least interested in sharing this, right? I mean, me having a network is not of, I mean, it's of use for something, but if people like you are not available or not keen on doing this kind of information sources, I think my primary interest today is to find ways to do knowledge transfer from people like you to people who it is hard to get. Meaning these people, I don't know where they are from, but if you really look at it, there are some parts of people who will never get to see you. Right? And I can guarantee that 80% or 90% of them are never going to see you physically, whereas they're getting your brain share and asking a question, right? That's also an interesting one. So we will stop here. I think we just joined to say that we will stop here. Ujjwal, I think the question that you're asking is the future of research interdisciplinary. I think that's clear. Yeah, everybody is doing only interdisciplinary. I know at least in the US there are funding agencies who are kind of pitching it, saying I'm pretty sure ITR also has this of bringing different departments of people. Only then we'll fund you. I think that's the way the world is going. So interdisciplinary is there.
But remember, the interdisciplinary is also a relative concept. Suppose that the science, for whatever reason, had not tessellated knowledge into physics and chemistry and math, and psychology, etc. These are little too gross dividers. But if the division was not along this grid, but a slightly different grid, then what we do today would have been interdisciplinary. Because discipline boundaries are somewhat artificial, somewhat, not completely, but somewhat. And so if you shift them, it becomes interdisciplinary. But what you shift them from was a function of some arbitrariness in the past. So interdisciplinary will be essential simply because you want to investigate every part of the space, no matter where you start.
Yeah. So let's keep this quick. So before the video starts, I think this is a nice question, which is what are your suggestions on undergraduates to prepare for PhD? What should they do?
Oh, I give you a very pakka answer for this. Okay, pakka, without fail. When you're reading your textbook or reading a chapter, no matter how low level or how high level, don't turn the page until you feel what's on the page. Unless you identify with what is being said, you feel the gravity, you feel the velocity, you feel the temperature. And when you feel it, then you go to the next page. Before you finish the book, you would be a PhD ready material.
Very nice. With that thought on pakka answer on undergraduates to get a PhD, I think it was nice having all of you. Thanks for joining the late in the time. And I think number of people who are viewing now at this hour is also pretty decent. So thanks for joining. And if you have any further questions, push it on to any one of these videos as comments. I will take it up. I will try to get Professor Ahuja's brain share on it and push it back to you guys. Yeah. Thanks. And thanks, Professor Ahuja, for your time.
And thank you all for coming.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye-bye.